Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Sip&Talkers, wherever you are in the world, welcome back.
Great to be here.
Today's deep dive, I think we can sum it up in one sentence. It is the geopolitical version of, that eternal chase. It's the most expensive, high-stakes game of cat and mouse the world has ever seen.
Or, to be even more accurate, I think it's the eternal chase of the shield versus the spear.
Oh, that's good.
And believe me, this chase is accelerating faster than a hypersonic missile right now.
That analogy just completely nails it. We are dissecting China's rapidly expanding military budget and, its massive capability increase. What is really going on here?
Yeah.
Is China genuinely under threat? Is someone about to invade them? Are there foreign armies just massing on its borders, forcing them to spend hundreds and hundreds of billions?
Well, that is the ultimate question, isn't it? That's what we have to get to today. We're going to, take an inventory of exactly who China says is threatening them and what those threats actually look like in practice.
Right.
Because the answers, they pretty much dictate the security or, the insecurity of the entire Indo-Pacific region.
Okay, so imagine this. Imagine you're at let's call it the global security party, right? And we have one guest, the spear guy, that's China.
Uh-huh.
He is swinging around this massive, sharp, and incredibly expensive spear, and it's making everyone else at the party, super nervous.
Right, very nervous.
But the spear guy is at the same time complaining about his neighbors, specifically the U.S. and its allies.
He's protesting, and he's doing it loudly. He's saying, look at those shiny shields you've all bought. They are a direct threat to my core interests. I'm only building this spear for self-defense, and yet you surround me with all this massive, gleaming defensive equipment.
Exactly. And meanwhile, his neighbors, countries like, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, they're just trying to keep the party from turning into a brawl. They're wiping the sweat off their brows, looking totally innocent and saying, dude, we started out with just small umbrellas to protect ourselves from your constant spear rain in the South China Sea.
Just a little bit of rain.
And now you've gone and upgraded your spear to a laser-guided, nuclear-tipped model, and you're complaining that our umbrellas are becoming slightly larger shields.
That right there, that is the absolute structural genius and, frankly, the tragedy of what international relations experts call the security dilemma.
That's the core concept.
It's the core concept driving our whole deep dive today.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit, because it really does set the foundation for everything we're about to talk about. You mentioned the spear guy's deep motivation.
You have to.
Right.
You have to understand the historical narrative that drives this whole thing. The Chinese perspective, and this is based on their own public statements, their white papers, it's deeply informed by the trauma of what they call the century of humiliation.
That was, the 19th century?
Starting in the mid-19th century, yeah. It was a period where foreign powers basically exploited and fractured China.
Mm-hmm.
And that trauma, it fuels this profound, deep-seated belief that external hostile powers are always seeking to contain or control China.
So in their mind, the shield wielders, the U.S. and its allies, they're just the latest version of that. They're coming for them.
Exactly. So this massive military buildup, it isn't just about protecting what they currently have. It's about making sure that historical vulnerability never, ever, ever happens again.
It's a never again philosophy.
It is. And that means their modern military goal has fundamentally shifted. It's no longer just about border patrol. It's about achieving, and this is the key phrase, the comprehensive ability to exclude all external intervention.
Specifically from the U.S.
Specifically from the U.S. so they can achieve their core political goals, the biggest of which, of course, is Taiwan unification. The spear has to be sharp enough to make sure nobody dares step into their strategic backyard.
Okay, so then you have the Shield Party, and they're arguing, look, we're not trying to invade China. We're not trying to overthrow their government.
No, of course not.
They say they're just reacting to the spear guy's, increasingly aggressive actions. Building military islands in disputed waters, the constant military pressure on Taiwan.
They feel forced to buy bigger shields. To get alliances like the Quad and AUKUS, they see it as a necessary reaction.
And here is the trap, right? This is the accelerating part.
This is the core of the security dilemma. Because China immediately interprets that counter-reaction, the purchasing of those bigger shields, as concrete evidence of a deliberate anti-China containment move.
So my self-defense
is proof of your hostile intent. And then my military upgrade to counter you becomes your justification for an even bigger shield. It's a self-accelerating, mutually fearful arms race. And it's driven by misperception, not necessarily by, some explicit plan to start a war tomorrow.
So in a weird way, both sides feel like they're the ones acting defensively. But the result is a region that is just getting less and less safe by the day.
It's a structural trap, and that's what we're dissecting today. We're embarking on a deep dive, ballooning military budgets. Who are the victims? We're going to meticulously break down the actual defense spending figures, the official ones, and the hidden ones, which radically change the story.
Right.
Then we'll analyze what specific military objectives China's building this spear to achieve. And finally, we'll list the nations China perceives as threats, using intelligence from places like SEPARI, the DoD, and CSIS, to get a truly balanced, factual view.
Okay, let's jump straight into the finances, because this is where the scale of China's ambition just becomes undeniable. China's defense spending is now the world's second largest, right? It's only trailing the United States. And this is a massive number. It's globally significant.
The sheer size of the official 2025 numbers is staggering. China's central government announced a defense budget of 1.78 trillion RMB.
Okay, and for our listeners following in US dollars, what does that break down to?
That's roughly, depending on the exchange rate that day, about 245 billion to 249 billion US dollars.
Wow. And just to put 245 billion into perspective, that's about the entire gross domestic product of a country like Portugal or New Zealand.
That's a good way to think about it. And it's not just the total, it's the pace of the increase that's really critical here. This budget represents a 7.2% annual growth rate.
And they've kept that up for 3 years straight.
For the third consecutive year, yes. Even while their overall economy has been slowing down.
Right, and Beijing's official explanation always includes a bit of what you call data artistry.
A little bit of spin, yeah. They are very quick to highlight the GDP share.
They always say, look, it's only 1.5% of our GDP.
Exactly. They consistently point out that this is lower than the global average and, far, far lower than the U.S., which spends roughly 3.5% of its much larger economy on defense.
Which is a very clever political defense, right? It makes China look cautious, financially responsible, only interested in moderate self-defense.
It does. But you have to look past that ratio and look at the trend. The critical detail here is the acceleration.
That 7.2% annual growth rate is way higher than their official GDP growth target, which is hovering around, 5%?
That's the absolute tell. That's it. When your defense budget is accelerating 40% faster than your overall national income, it broadcasts a clear, undeniable political truth.
Which is?
That security and military modernization are now being prioritized over pure, immediate economic growth. This is a crucial shift in national priorities, especially when you consider the internal economic headwinds they're facing.
Like massive debt, slowing consumer spending, all that stuff.
All of it.
Yeah.
The military gets the first, the biggest, and the fastest slice of the national pie.
Okay, but this brings us to the real question, the one that defines this whole section. Are those official numbers even real?
In a word, no.
International analysts pretty much all agree they're not. This is where we get into the black numbers and external scrutiny.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the think tanks, defense intelligence bodies like the U.S. Department of Defense, SEPARI in Stockholm, CSIS here in D.C. These are the world's leading experts on this stuff. And they universally contend that China's true expenditure is significantly higher.
Why? What's hidden?
Because the official budget has so many hidden expenses. It's like a governmental shell game. They're hiding crucial receipts under different departmental couches.
Okay, so give us the big ones. What are the biggest hidden costs?
The biggest one, and maybe the hardest to track, is research and development, R&D.
For all the new high-tech weapons.
Exactly. When you are pouring billions into developing entirely new systems, hypersonic missiles, advanced stealth tech, AI integration, that spending is colossal. And a lot of that funding is routed through civilian ministries or state-owned industrial sectors, so it never shows up in the official defense budget.
Okay, so R&D is number one. What's next?
Number two would be strategic forces. This covers the hugely expensive upkeep and expansion of their nuclear programs, their missile forces, and their rapidly developing space program. These are the ultimate tools of national power. And the funding is often, obscured in opaque line items.
Right. And what else?
Third, and this is often overlooked, is the sheer cost of personnel support. Retirement and veteran support for millions of former military members is a huge continuous drain on the state budget. The analysis suggests this routinely bypasses the primary PLA budget.
And finally, what about the People's Armed Police, the PAP?
The PP is a big one. While they're technically a paramilitary force for internal security, they are heavily armed, very well trained, and they act as a critical tool for internal stability in places like Xinjiang or Tibet.
And since they're not technically the PLA, their budget is separate.
Their enormous budget often sits completely outside the defense total. So when international experts try to add all those hidden expenditures back onto the ledger, that official $245 billion figure starts to look less like a budget and more like a down payment.
So what's the real range? I know the data is murky, but what's the estimate for the true spending?
The estimation range is massive, which just shows you how opaque the data is. But DoD and SBIRI reports suggest the official figure might be underestimated by anywhere from 40% to as much as 90%.
40 to 90%. That is a phenomenal swing, but either way, it completely changes the story.
It does. If you take the conservative end, say 40%, the real spending is likely around $330 billion. But if you want to get to the high-end estimates, we have to introduce a really critical financial concept.
Okay.
Purchasing power parity, or PPP.
Okay, so for our listeners, explain PPP. It sounds like something only an economist would care about, but for military spending, it's absolutely essential.
It is. PPP basically adjusts for the fact that a dollar buys different amounts of stuff in different countries.
Right. A coffee in New York costs way more than a coffee in Beijing.
Exactly. And for military spending, this is crucial. In the United States, paying a soldier's salary, buying steel for a warship, or compensating a scientist for R&D is extremely expensive.
Labor costs, material costs, everything's higher.
Everything. In China, those local costs, especially labor, local materials, internal manufacturing, are dramatically cheaper.
So China can build a massive advanced aircraft carrier
for substantially less than the U.S. can build an equivalent carrier. The nominal dollar amount of $245 billion, if you adjust it for the internal purchasing power of their currency, means China gets substantially more military bang for its buck.
More tanks, more soldiers, more R&D for the same dollar amount.
Precisely. So when you combine the hidden costs, the R&D, the space program, the veterans, with the PPP adjustment, what do you get?
That's where you get the truly terrifying external estimates.
Yes. When these two factors are fully combined, the real spending estimation potentially pushes the true figure to around $507 billion, and some experts suggest, when fully adjusted for everything, it could be as high as $700 billion annually.
$700 billion. Now, that is still technically less than the U.S. 2025 budget of $850 billion, but it changes the dynamic completely.
Absolutely does. It moves China from being a relatively modest, cautious defender to an aggressively modernizing global power, pouring vast, sustained resources into its military machine at a speed that has just exploded over the last 2 decades.
It transforms the spear guy from someone holding a little wooden stick for defense into someone holding a massive laser-guided titanium weapon aimed at every strategic asset in the region.
And of course, China's official spokespeople just completely reject this. They call the high external estimates hype about the China threat theory designed to contain them.
But the numbers tell the story. That 7.2% growth rate, maintained even while the economy slows, it confirms the priority has shifted.
Yep.
The military is eating a larger and larger slice of the national pie, even if the government is only showing us the receipt for the groceries.
They forgot to show us the credit card bill for the new stealth fighter program.
Exactly. And that pie is being used to build capability. Which brings us to our next point. What specifically is the spear designed to do?
So we've established the immense financial weight of the spear, whether you believe it's $245 billion or the estimated $700 billion. But money is just potential, right?
Right.
So let's pivot now. What specific military muscle is this enormous budget actually buying? What is the PLA's detailed job description for this decade?
The goals seem to be layered. There's both a defensive side and a really ambitious side. We have to start with Goal 1, political mandates and historical lessons. The official defense claim.
Right. Officially, it's all about defensive modernization. They argue they need this capability to safeguard national sovereignty, ensure peace, and protect their rapidly expanding overseas interests.
Like the Belt and Road Initiative, all those investments.
Exactly. The official stance is that they are merely responding to a severe and complex international environment that demands resilience.
But this is all underpinned by President Xi Jinping's long-term, very ambitious goal, which is achieving a world-class military by 2049.
And that year is incredibly significant. It's the centennial of the founding of the People's Republic, massive political milestone.
But there's an even more immediate and strategically critical benchmark, isn't there?
Yes, 2027. That is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the PLA itself.
And by that date, what's the goal?
By that date, the PLA aims to achieve what they call modernization fusion, which encompasses the three erodizations: mechanization, informatization, and intelligentization.
Which in simple terms means?
It means they need a fully functioning, advanced, digitized, and AI-capable force by 2027. This isn't just about long-term dreams. This is about immediate, achievable milestones.
And this whole effort is constantly framed by that historical narrative, the idea that a weak army leads to a dynasty's collapse.
For the current leadership, military strength is intrinsically linked to the Communist Party's legitimacy and the whole concept of China's national rejuvenation. Fu Xingmeng. They have to be strong to avoid a repeat of the past.
Okay, so if that is the defensive claim, let's turn to goal 2. Core offensive capabilities, the ambition claim. This is where the spear's ultimate purpose becomes much clearer.
And the ultimate, non-negotiable target remains Taiwan unification. Everything the PLA builds, from missile silos to new transport ships, is primarily focused on achieving military dominance in the Taiwan Strait.
Enough dominance to either coerce unification or, if necessary, achieve it by force.
Correct. And this focus is what drives the development of anti-accessory denial, A2AD capabilities.
Okay, A2AD. This is a concept our listeners really need to grasp. It's not just defense, is it?
It's not. It's a strategic umbrella designed to deter, delay, or destroy U.S. forces that might try to intervene in a Taiwan conflict. It's an offensive-defense strategy.
So what does A2AD look like in practice? What are they building?
The core tool of A2AD is long-range, precision, anti-ship, and anti-air missile systems. The most famous example is the DF-26 missile.
The so-called Guam killer.
The Guam killer, exactly. This is a ballistic missile with the range to hit U.S. naval assets thousands of miles from the Chinese coast, specifically targeting high-value assets like aircraft carriers and U.S. bases on Guam.
So the goal isn't necessarily to fight and win a long war against the U.S.
No, the goal is to create a no-go zone. They want to make the cost of intervention so prohibitively high, potentially losing a $13 billion aircraft carrier and thousands of personnel, that the U.S. decides that getting involved is simply not worth the risk.
It's strategic calculus.
It is, and the goal is dual-pronged. First, to subdue the enemy without fighting through an overwhelming military posture. And second, if deterrence fails, they must be able to force surrender through combat by quickly achieving local dominance before any external help can possibly arrive.
And beyond Taiwan, the second major ambition is regional hegemony and global projection. They're building a navy at a shocking pace.
An astronomical pace. They already have the world's largest navy by sheer number of ships, including 3 aircraft carriers already launched. And this is all in support of becoming a great maritime power by 2035.
Which is essential for a great power, right? You have to be able to protect your global trade routes, those Belt and Road investments that span Asia, Africa, and Europe.
Right. And that requires long-range, rapid deployment forces. You have to be able to project power well beyond your immediate shores. You have to move beyond being just a coastal defense force.
And this all relies on their massive investment in high tech. The budget is funding things like advanced research into hypersonic missiles,
which fly at over Mach 5 and are incredibly difficult to track and intercept. They're also investing heavily in drone swarms and rapidly expanding their space and cyber warfare capacities. They recognize that the next major conflicts will be fought in the digital domain as much as the physical one.
And we absolutely have to talk about the nuclear dimension here, because this is the ultimate statement of great power ambition.
It is. The sources indicate a massive nuclear expansion is underway.
What are the numbers?
They're significant. China is projected to have an estimated 600 warheads by 2025 and is aiming for 1,500 by 2035.
That is a huge shift.
It's a rapid and fundamental shift.
Yeah.
Historically, China maintained what was called a minimum deterrence posture. Just enough nukes to make sure they could retaliate if they were attacked.
But this new posture, aiming for 1,500 warheads, that's different.
That shifts them toward a peer deterrence model, confirming their long-term goal of challenging U.S. military dominance across all domains, including the strategic one. That kind of expansion isn't for defense against invasion. It's a bid for equal strategic status with the U.S. and Russia.
Which brings us to their formal strategic guidance. The PLA calls it active defense, Zhiji Fengyu.
Right. And this concept is the key to understanding how they synthesize defense and offense. It means that while China claims it won't initiate a conflict on a global scale, it's strategically defensive within its self-defined periphery, like the South China Sea or the Taiwan Strait. It reserves the right to rapidly and decisively win conflicts by being operationally offensive.
So they punch first, and they punch hard if they think their core interests are being threatened.
Exactly. So the overall purpose of this spear is a fusion. Historical trauma drives the need for defense, and strategic ambition drives the need for overwhelming offense. They're trying to reshape the regional order and challenge U.S. military dominance, all while saying they're just seeking stability.
They just want the option to win any local conflict immediately.
And that option changes everything.
So if the spear is getting this massive budget and this incredible technical capability, who is the target? I mean, China constantly claims to be the victim of external forces, but we need to list the specific nations and specific actions that Beijing genuinely perceives as a threat in 2025.
And we have to start with the framework, which is often misunderstood in the West.
Yeah.
China's not worried about a direct invasion of Beijing or Shanghai. They don't think that's going to happen.
Right.
They frame the risk not as invasion, but as strategic compression, intervention, or the destruction of core interests. The core threat, in their view, comes from external intervention and the coordinated efforts of Western anti-China forces to stifle their rise.
They're worried about external navies blocking the Taiwan Strait or preventing them from controlling the South China Sea. They're worried about being boxed in.
Exactly. And before we dive into the external threats, we have to acknowledge the powerful internal risk that the analysis highlights.
Right, because this context is crucial.
It is. Domestic challenges, like their rapidly aging population, a massive debt-to-GDP ratio over 270%, all this creates immense internal pressure on the leadership.
Which leads directly to this concept of the window of opportunity. Xi Changqiu, why does internal weakness drive external aggression? It seems counterintuitive.
Because they believe they have a limited time frame. The Chinese leadership is acutely aware that if they wait too long, say, another 10 or 15 years, the immense demographic and debt burdens might cripple their ability to project power.
The demographic cliff is coming. The debt bomb is ticking.
Absolutely. So they feel they must achieve their core national interests, namely unification with Taiwan, before the economic and demographic resources needed for such an action are gone. The internal clock is short.
So the internal pressure actually incentivizes faster, more aggressive action now, while the economy can still support that 7.2% budget hike.
Exactly. Okay, now let's list the external threats, focusing strictly on China's view of them, starting with the undisputed leader. Number one, the United States, the primary competitor.
The U.S. is enemy number one in their strategic documents.
Without a doubt. The reasons are extensive. The U.S. is the architect of what they see as Indo-Pacific containment efforts, the Quad, AUKUS, bilateral defense pacts. The U.S. also imposes severe economic sanctions, especially the chip bans, which China views as a deliberate attempt to strangle their technological rise.
But the real friction is military, isn't it? The perceived intervention in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea.
That's the core of it. China calls the U.S. the strategic opponent and accuses them of practicing a Cold War mentality, of manufacturing an enemy out of China just to maintain global hegemony and justify their own massive defense budget.
Okay, so after the U.S., we have the most volatile region. Number two, Taiwan, the core crisis.
For Beijing, Taiwan is not a foreign policy challenge. It's a core domestic sovereignty issue. It's seen as a split force, challenging the central government's authority. Any external assistance, especially from the U.S. or Japan, is viewed as the greatest existential threat to their national rejuvenation dream.
And the result is what we see all the time. The PLA's constant, large-scale, around Taiwan military drills.
Those are direct, practical responses to this perceived threat of external forces colluding with Taipei. It's military signaling designed to break Taipei's will to resist.
Okay, moving on from there, we have number three, Japan, the proxy and historical animosity.
And this relationship is just poisoned by history, and recent events have made it so much worse.
China condemns Japan on two fronts, right? First is the expansion of their self-defense forces, their plan to increase defense spending to 2% of GDP.
Which is a massive reversal of their post-World War II defense posture. And second, Japan's increasing willingness to comment on and intervene in the Taiwan Strait issue, which China sees as interference in its internal affairs and a potential reversal of history.
Beijing basically sees Japan as a dangerous U.S. proxy.
Completely. They point specifically to things like the 2025 joint statements between the U.S., Japan, and the Philippines on the South China Sea. They see Japan as using American muscle to achieve its own strategic goals.
And that brings us to the maritime hotspot. Number four, the Philippines.
This is a source of constant low-level military friction. China accuses Manila of infringement and provocation in disputed waters, especially around Renai or the Second Thomas Shoal.
Right, where we see those dramatic videos of Chinese Coast Guard ships using high-pressure water cannons against Philippine boats.
That's classic gray zone coercion aggression, just below the threshold of open warfare. But the crucial military component is the Philippines allowing the U.S. military access to more key bases under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA.
And that's a game changer.
It is, because these new EDCA bases, particularly the ones in the northern Philippines, give the U.S. a strategic foothold just a few hundred miles from Taiwan and key choke points in the South China Sea.
Which, from Beijing's perspective, is intolerable.
They view it as a deliberate anti-China encirclement, accusing Manila of relying on external forces to cause trouble at sea.
And finally, number 5, India, the border and geopolitical rivalry.
Right. While they aren't engaged in a maritime conflict, the rivalry is deep and strategic. The friction points are straightforward, ongoing, sometimes deadly border disputes in places like Ladakh, and the fact that India is a critical member of the Quad.
Which China sees as part of the strategy to counterbalance them across Asia.
And we should also briefly cover the supporting actors in this perceived strategic compression. Australia is heavily criticized for joining AUKUS. The UK is also an AUKUS member and faced China's ire over Hong Kong. And Canada is part of the Five Eyes intelligence network. They're all seen as part of the same team.
So the central takeaway here is critical. China is not under threat of a literal invasion. The threats they perceive are focused entirely on areas of claimed sovereignty: Taiwan, the South China Sea, the border with India.
The so what is that China feels threatened because the actions of these nations are impeding its ability to realize its self-defined core national interests. The issue is sovereignty and strategic ambition, not immediate survival.
Okay, so let's circle back to the structural problem we identified right at the beginning. The security dilemma.
Right.
Why does the spear guy, who feels vulnerable because of historical trauma and the strategic compression, insist on brandishing a weapon funded by that 7.2% growing budget that terrifies everyone else into buying bigger shields?
It's the vicious self-fulfilling prophecy of the security paradox.
And we have to emphasize the crucial disconnect here. There is a lack of an existential threat. I mean, no neighboring country intends to invade and destroy the Chinese regime.
No. Their actions, AUKUS, the Quad, EDCA base access, are purely focused on regional balancing and deterrence, not on global conquest.
But China interprets these deterrence efforts as encirclement. And at the same time, their own actions, building military islands, massive military exercises, fielding advanced weapons, are viewed by their neighbors as attempts to unilaterally change the status quo.
And this fear naturally drives the neighbors to acquire stronger shields. Look at the examples of the shield response. Japan's decision to rapidly increase defense spending to 2% of GDP is framed in Tokyo not as an offensive measure, but as damage limitation against daily Chinese incursions into their claimed waters.
They're just reacting.
They're reacting defensively. Similarly, the Philippines. Their restoration of access to more U.S. EDCA bases is purely an act of defensive survival against constant Chinese gray zone coercion.
Right, they're just trying to protect their fishing boats and small maritime claims.
Their motivation is protection, not aggression.
Which brings us to a crucial point about the domestic politics of the spear, China's double standard. The internal justification for this is absolutely vital for the leadership.
It is. Domestically, the constant pervasive rhetoric of the external threat and Western containment serves a powerful political purpose.
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction from internal economic problems. It justifies the massive defense spending, that relentless 7.2% hike, and it consolidates power toward achieving those critical 2027 and 2049 military goals.
So if Beijing suddenly announced tomorrow that there was no external threat, that 7.2% defense budget increase would be politically toxic.
It would be impossible to explain to a population worried about housing debt and a slowing economy. They need the manufactured external threat to rationalize the spending priority. The threat narrative is a vital internal control mechanism.
And externally, the spear is a coercive tool.
This is the operational goal. By constantly displaying sharper military power around Taiwan, through naval patrols, through hypersonic development, China seeks to achieve its political ends without actual war.
They're trying to make the cost of intervention for the U.S. and its allies, or the cost of resistance for Taiwan, prohibitively high before a shot is even fired.
It's the goal of forcing peace, or unity, through combat readiness. They want the political outcome of a military victory without ever having to engage in the combat itself. They want the opponent to believe they've already lost.
And this structural incompatibility leads us directly into the zero-sum trap.
That's right. The analysis suggests that China wants its national rejuvenation, its Fuqingming. But its current military approach requires poking others and taking unilateral actions to get it. Conversely, the U.S. and its allies want stability and the maintenance of the current rules-based order.
And those two goals cannot coexist peacefully in the same strategic space.
And that's why the spiral accelerates. China feels strategically compressed, driven by historical trauma and the ticking clock of internal debt and demographics, so it rapidly sharpens the spear.
Yeah, and the allies see the sharper spear, so they strengthen the shield.
AUKUS nuclear subs, NDCA base access. Both sides genuinely believe they are acting defensively, fulfilling their national duties, yet they are collectively making the entire Indo-Pacific region exponentially less safe.
It is the purest expression of the classic security dilemma.
It really is.
So, we've successfully decoded the nuances of this classic comedy of the security dilemma. We broke down the official $245 billion budget and contrasted it with those high-end external estimates that, when you factor in purchasing power parity and hidden spending, push the real total towards $700 billion or more.
And we've analyzed how that deep-seated perception, the historical trauma, the ticking internal clock of the window of opportunity drives strategic action. Specifically, China's focus on building A2AD capabilities aimed at deterring the U.S. and achieving Taiwan unification.
And critically, we've established that the current conflict is not about who wants to invade China, but who is challenging China's self-defined, non-negotiable core national interests.
Right. And we want to remind everyone that this analysis is based on objective facts drawn from official white papers and external intelligence reports. Our goal here on Sip and Talk is always to provide you with the factual foundation for independent critical thinking, not to criticize or endorse any single viewpoint.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. The source material suggests a potential, though, frustratingly slow path out of this security spiral. More dialogue. Focusing on non-military cooperation, like joint disaster relief drills or strengthening mechanisms like the ASEAN Code of Conduct.
Yeah, talking more.
So if the short-term solution to this massive structural, expensive conflict is simply talking more, what concrete actions would you suggest to change the current strategic incentives?
Think specifically about that incentive structure. What non-military move could the spear guy make? Maybe offering verifiable transparency on their R&D budget? Or what defensive gesture could the shield party make, perhaps limiting the deployment of certain systems to specific areas?
Something so that both sides stop seeing the other's actions as an immediate existential threat to their core interests.
It's a structural problem, and it requires creative, non-military solutions to break the spiral.
That is a massive question to mull over during your next coffee break. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into global security and military spending. We hope this gave you the knowledge you needed, quickly and thoroughly.
Before you go, make sure you subscribe to Sip and Talk for more rigorous analysis, and don't forget to check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickytolife, for some fun memes and the latest travel vlogs.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Stay safe out there, Sip and Talkers.